At its peak, one empire controlled 60 million people. It stretched across 3 whole continents, and it built roads so incredibly well engineered that some are literally still standing today, 2,000 years later. And then, within just a few generations, it collapsed. And it collapsed so completely that Europe actually forgot how to build in concrete for the next 1,000 years. So today, we're diving into the full story of how Rome rose, how it ruled the known world, and how it ultimately fell apart from the inside long before anyone on the outside even finished the job. In this explainer, we're covering 3 main things. Number 1, the rise. Number 2, the actual cracks that started the decline. And number 3, the end. Because that last part, it definitely isn't what you learned in school. Chapter 1, the rise. For 500 years, Rome just kept expanding. But, it wasn't just through military conquest. It was through alliances. They actually offered conquered people a path to Roman citizenship instead of just, crushing them. And honestly, this is probably the most underrated reason Rome succeeded where other empires failed. They made people want to become Roman. But of course, they also backed that up with the absolute most disciplined fighting force in the ancient world. Picture this. They'd initiate combat by throwing the pilum, a super heavy javelin perfectly designed to shatter enemy shield walls. Then, they'd close the gap with the gladius, a short sword that was just perfectly optimized for fighting in tight formations behind their scutum, their massive rectangular shield. Unlike rival armies that kind of just relied on chaotic individual aggression, the Romans fought like a hyper-coordinated machine. They'd constantly rotate fresh cohorts into the fray without ever breaking that shield wall. It was brilliant. But all this massive success, it accidentally created a huge problem that nobody saw coming. Chapter 2. The cracks begin. So as Rome's territory blew up in size, so did the power of individual generals. These were guys commanding massive armies that were personally loyal to them, not the state. And this is exactly where things start to unravel. On January 11th, 49 BC, Julius Caesar makes a fateful choice. He crosses the Rubicon River with his army. Now, this was literally illegal. Generals were strictly forbidden from bringing their armies into Roman territory, but he did it anyway. And the craziest part? He completely got away with it. The Republic, however, did not survive it. Within just a few years, Rome transforms from an elected republic into a full-blown empire, ruled by one single man, Augustus. For the next 200 years, this setup actually worked beautifully. It brought in the Pax Romana, trade absolutely flourished across 3 continents, and Roman territory reached its absolute peak. It's fascinating how a 19-year-old heir, Octavian, who became Augustus, managed to completely leverage Julius Caesar's legacy to build this new power structure. He so masterfully shifted the narrative that the public basically traded their republic for an emperor just to get some stability. But you see, here is the massive flaw with an empire built around one all-powerful ruler. Everything completely depends on who that ruler happens to be. Chapter 3. The slow collapse. Here is a major misconception. Rome did not just fall in one day. It suffered this agonizing 200-year slow-motion collapse. With no reliable system for choosing the next emperor and an empire that was way too massive to govern from a single city, we hit what's known as the crisis of the 3rd century. And the historical sources show us this wasn't just a minor political hiccup. It was a total systemic breakdown. In 235 AD, a brutal 50-year period of military anarchy kicks off. Then, right in the middle of that, 249 AD, a devastating pandemic called the Plague of Cyprian strikes. It wipes out a huge chunk of the population and triggers a massive labor shortage. Things got so incredibly bad that by 260 AD, the empire literally fractured into 3 competing states. It was total chaos. Small farmers were so desperate to hide from civil wars and invasions that they basically signed away their civil rights to wealthy landholders just for physical protection, which, by the way, totally laid the groundwork for medieval serfdom. And sure, Emperor Aurelian managed to reunify Rome around 270 AD, and Diocletian later split the administration in 284 just to keep it functioning, but the internal damage, it was profound, and it was permanent. But wait, it gets worse. Another huge factor that completely wrecked trust in the Roman economy was currency debasement. Basically, emperors kept slashing the amount of actual silver inside Roman coins to pay for their endless wars, while pretending the coins were still worth the same amount. Which, yeah, that is textbook inflation. The silver content absolutely plummets to almost nothing, while the cost of maintaining the legions skyrockets to unsustainable levels. The government was just minting worthless money to fund a massive military deficit, and it sparked crippling hyperinflation. By the 3rd century, Rome was cracking under its own sheer weight. And remember, that's before we even start talking about the outside pressure.
Chapter 4. The End.
So most textbooks compress this entire era into one simple sentence. Barbarian invasions caused the fall of Rome. Which is technically true, but it is highly misleading. You see, the Great Migration wasn't just a bunch of bloodthirsty warriors randomly deciding to attack a perfectly healthy empire. No, climate change in Central Asia was heavily pushing nomadic groups, especially the Huns, further westward. This triggered a massive refugee crisis. Germanic tribes were literally fleeing into Roman borders, basically begging for a safe place to live. But Rome's economy was already completely shattered. Their taxes had become so incredibly crushing that everyday Roman citizens actually started siding with the incoming tribes just to escape the oppression of their own government. So when Alaric and the Visigoths finally sacked Rome in 410 AD, they weren't actually there to burn civilization to the ground. They heavily respected Rome. They were mostly just looking for a massive payout and some secure land to settle on. But that devastating event proved one thing to the world. Rome's central authority was completely hollowed out. But here is the absolute ultimate twist of this explainer. The Roman Empire didn't just disappear. It split. The Western Roman Empire completely collapsed and was quietly annexed into a barbarian kingdom in 476 AD. Honestly, it was almost anticlimactic. But the Eastern Roman Empire, the half we usually call the Byzantine Empire today, it survived. And it didn't just survive for a couple more decades. It kept going for another 1,000 years. Operating out of the heavily fortified capital of Constantinople, they kept the culture, the architecture, and the unbroken legacy of the Roman emperors totally alive. So, if that's the case, when did the Roman Empire actually end? Not until 1453 AD. For 12 entire centuries, Constantinople's massive triple-layered Theodosian walls were completely impregnable. I mean, they survived absolutely terrifying sieges from the Arabs, the Rus, the Bulgars, you name it. But eventually, the technology of warfare caught up. Sultan Mehmed II arrived outside the city with a terrifying new weapon, massive cannons. We're talking guns over 9 meters long, capable of firing 500-kilo stone balls. And on a Tuesday in May 1453, those legendary walls were finally blasted into rubble. The city was taken, and the Roman Empire, the very last surviving link between the ancient and medieval worlds, was finally extinguished. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We so often look at the fall of Rome as just ancient history, right? Something totally disconnected from our modern lives. But if a highly advanced, complex system that lasted 2 millennia ultimately collapsed primarily from within, driven by deep political polarization, unchecked inflation, and the slow, quiet decay of its own institutions, well, what unseen cracks might be forming in our own modern society today? Something to think about. Keep learning, stay curious, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.